is that, I can actually use this. About 50% of all the, what VC is? Venture capital?
Yeah.
So 50% of all the VC money in the United States comes right here to Silicon Valley. And that's been that number for at least 20 years or so. So people are always talking about how there's going to be a new Silicon Valley. It's going to be in Sacramento. It's going to be in San Diego. It's going to be in Shanghai. It's going to be in Beijing. It's going to be in Hyderabad. It's going to be in Bangalore. But the truth is that most VC money still comes here. Because here, there's a unique combination of universities with industry, a favorable climate, and a lot of really motivated, talented people. So they come here to create something, to start Google, or Cisco, or Oracle. And so I was going to mention why I'm doing this for Sherry. I used to be an engineer, and I used to be an engineering student in the university. And I had no idea then what the real world was like. I had no idea what kind of jobs are out there. If you get an engineering degree, you might go into design, but you might be doing marketing, you might be doing sales, you might be doing manufacturing. There's a lot of different jobs that people can have an engineering degree and use. So if I knew then what I know now, I think I would have made some different choices. There we go. We have the technology. So what my company does, we don't find jobs for people. We find people for jobs. It's a big difference. If someone comes to me and says, I'm looking for a job, can you help me? I probably can't help them. But if some company says to me, we need to hire someone who does HTML5 and CSS3 and JavaScript and Ajax, there's not enough of those people around. So they pay me to go find someone and convince that person to leave their job and jump over to the new company. That's what we get paid for. So it's the opposite focus of an employment agency. It's a search firm. We're looking for people to pull them out of where they are to join a new company. And hopefully they're going to the next Google, or Oracle, or Cisco, or Apple. So that's why people do that here. So my company is, where is it? It's called, well, where is it? Right there. We're called NetSoft. The reason for that is the markets we work in are networking and software. So we focus on networking and software startups. And the positions we do for a company are pretty much every position that a company has except for the financial people, the accountants, and the secretaries, the administrative assistants. And we don't do CEO searches, but everything else we do. So vice president of engineering, or a software developer, or an ASIC designer, or someone who does PC board layout, or someone who's doing software tools, or someone who's doing software quality assurance. So we do all those positions. Any questions so far? Probably not. Hey, how do you advance this? Just enter. Next slide. There we go. That's it. Okay. So along the way, how many in the room have heard of Apple, and Cisco, Oracle, Google, Yahoo, right? So if you want to get a job there, you just go online and send your resume. Not hard. So I work with companies that nobody's ever heard of because they're tiny, they're brand new, and they want to become something great. So one of my clients was a company called Grand Junction Networks. Cisco bought them for $350 million, and then Cisco split 5 times. Their stock split 5 times. So that ended up becoming a $2 billion acquisition. And the people that started that company, when they started, they were nothing. They were as big as this team right here. Nobody knew about them. Nobody cared about them. But there's a few people who have a mind to find the next Google, the next Cisco, the next Oracle. A company we worked with in the early 90s, Network Peripherals, they were the top performing IPO in the United States in 1994. A company I work with called Amber, they were bought by Nokia. Aruba Networks, has anybody heard of Aruba? They're the second largest Wi-Fi provider in the world. And they went public in 2007. Some of you are not old enough to know Netscape. So Netscape was the original internet browser. And they are a wildly performing company. Now, some of you may have heard of NetScreen. NetScreen? Okay. Well, NetScreen was a company that beat Cisco in the security space, SSL, IPsec, VPN. And they were founded by 3 college guys who went to Tsinghua in Beijing. Now, they came to the States. One worked for Cisco. They didn't work at the same company, but they had gone to college together. Now, you all go to the same school, right? So imagine that after you graduate, you go work somewhere, and 10 years after you've graduated, you reconnect with a couple people here and you start a new company. That's what NetScreen did. So they went public, and then later they were bought by Juniper for $4 billion. It's a very successful company, and founded by friends all from the same school in China. Okay. Boy, we're having a lot of problem with that, aren't we? Okay, next slide. There we go. Ruckus Wireless has got probably the best wireless of any of the Wi-Fi vendors. They just went public last year, one of my clients. And then we work with a lot of different venture capital firms. Have anybody heard of Sequoia Capital? Okay, so Sequoia Capital was the original money behind Oracle, Cisco, Network Appliance, Apple, Cypress, NVIDIA, Yahoo, PayPal, LinkedIn, FireEye just went public, Google, YouTube, Tumblr, Square, Zappos, Kayak, Palo Alto Networks, Dropbox. This is just Instagram, or just a few. So at one point, Sequoia Capital, that 20% of the value of the NASDAQ stock exchange, were companies funded by Sequoia Capital. So they have been arguably the number 1 or number 2 venture capital firm in the country. The other one would be, so Sequoia, and the other one is Kleiner Perkins. Kleiner Perkins was the money behind Amazon. They also were with Sequoia on Google. So those are the 2 biggest venture firms in the Bay Area. And we've been able to work with them and do searches with them. And actually place some of the people that became venture capitalists there. Okay. Thanks. Now, startups. Silicon Valley is not primarily known for the large companies that are here. You know, Cisco, Hewlett-Packard. That's not primarily what Silicon Valley is known for. It's known for being a place that those companies get their start. So why do people join startups when there's risk? There's risk joining a startup. That's a reason people don't join startups. But many years ago, they did a study. And the people in the study, to be in the study, you had to be at least 95 years old. So there's not many people that have been around that long. And they asked these people, if you could live your life over again, what would you do differently? And the number 1 answer they said is they would have spent more time in reflection. They would have spent more time thinking, more time just contemplating. But the second most common response is they would have taken greater risks. Most people go to their grave regretting that they didn't take more chances, didn't try something that they wanted to do but they were afraid to. So startups are all about risk. But I'm going to show you why without risk you can never have the iPhone. You can never have Google. Right? All those things require risk. And so if you go and spend your whole life at big companies, you will limit what you can do with your career. But if part of your career means working in startup companies, you'll learn so much, you'll grow so much, personally and professionally. But it's risky. Okay. Do you know that in America, 70% of Americans want to start their own business? 70%. Most people you walk down the street, would you like to have your own business? Yeah, someday I want to have my own business. Someday I want a projector that works. But only 15% actually try. So why do most people who want to start their own business don't do that? Because there's risk. What if I fail? What if I lose money? What if I'm embarrassed because I failed in front of my friends? I tried my hardest and I failed. That's how it works. Now, entrepreneurship in China, as you probably know, amongst people your age, is declining. More and more people who are young in China are not wanting to start their own business. And people are concerned about that. Because do you know that in the United States, do you know where most of the jobs come from, new jobs? They come from small companies, not from GE and IBM, Siemens, right? They come from small companies. That's where wealth is created. That's where jobs are created. Big companies are pretty good at acquiring what some other small company has done and managing it. But big companies are not good at internal organic growth. And finally, lifetime employment. When I moved to California, I asked a friend, I said, where do you want to work? He goes, I'm trying to get into IBM. I said, why do you want to work at IBM? He goes, because if I get a job there, I can work there the rest of my life. That's what people actually thought. There's people that actually still think that way. Not many people think that today, but this was 30 years ago. So sure enough, he got a job at IBM, and within 5 years, he was laid off. And he hasn't worked at IBM since. And so whether it's IBM or GE or the US Post Office, there's all kinds of jobs that people think are going to last for a lifetime. They don't. So understand that in your career, you'll probably move around a few times. So that's why it's important to make moves for the right reason. Any questions so far? Go ahead. Thank you. Next. That's good. Okay. So, what kind of jobs are available for engineering graduates? Well, I hope you can read this. At the top, there's the CEO. And so typically in a startup company, he's got a VP of engineering, a vice president of marketing, a vice president of sales, and over here is operations and finance, which we don't care as much about for our discussion. Then the VP of engineering will have under him a director of hardware, if the company builds hardware. They'll have someone running software, someone running testing, QA. The marketing people, someone has to do product marketing, someone has to do product management, someone has to do the MarCom, marketing communications. How does that company communicate to investors? How do they communicate to Wall Street? How do they communicate to their customers? So in like a web startup, a lot of times this person is one of the most important people in the company. It's how the company relates to the outside world. VP of Sales, CALA, is Central America, Latin America. So usually they'll have someone who's in charge of North America, and Central America and Latin America is one person. EMEA is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. They always, in Silicon Valley, they always lump Europe with the Middle East and Africa for sales. And then Asia Pacific is all Asia and the Pacific Rim. So, yeah, go ahead. So, the VP of Engineering, he's going to have a hardware director. So someone's in charge of board design. So there's hardware engineers, someone doing a verification, layout. There's someone who has to manage the lab. The lab manager actually is a pretty important guy. You don't want someone making $140,000 a year as a really good board designer, taking his time to stuff a PC board and fix that resistor and get the solder gun out. You want someone who's really good with his hands, doesn't have to have a brain from MIT to do that. So you have a lab manager. And then if the company's got ASICs, less and less startups are doing ASICs. They're way too costly. Almost everything is in FPGAs now. But ASIC design, verification, you got CAD tool person, etc. And then there's a mechanical. On the mechanical side, there's thermal issues, right? There's vibration and shock, etc. Next slide. So the software director. So usually, depending on the company again, you got application software, UI, layer 7 on the OSI model, and you've got the embedded guys, right? Firmware, kernel OS, driver software, and over here, this could be server side, it could be UI apps, and this is a huge field all by itself. Like right now, there's probably 50 companies looking for front-end engineers. So UI, experience with good layout, and CSS, HTML coding, etc. And then if the company's doing communications, then you got protocols people. People who know RF or BGP4, or they know Mac and PhyLayer. This is really hot. People that know Mac and PhyLayer, for all of you electrical engineers, these communication people, that's really, really good skill set to have. And then sales. See, some people who get engineering degrees will actually go into sales. Right? If you're selling a highly complex product, you can't hire someone who's working at McDonald's to do that. So some of the best salespeople have degrees from Stanford, MIT. And sales usually is broken up by region or by channels, and then you have to have the pre-sales. So next slide. Most people in engineering don't go into sales. Product management, same thing with the product manager. I don't know if you know this, but The person who does best at becoming a venture capitalist is not a VP of engineering, although there's some, not a VP of sales, it's a VP of product management. That's the best skill set to become a venture capitalist, because the product manager is the one that has to know, what does the customer want? What are the features and benefits we want in this product? What are the trade-offs? The product manager is highly technical, so they know that we can't do that. Yeah, sure, the market wants it, but it doesn't exist. So they're the ones that live in the tension between what the customer wants and what the market can deliver at a price that can be delivered. So these people can be pivotal in any startup company. Next slide. And then marketing. How do you communicate? Collateral, competitive analysis, messaging for your sales, demand generation. So how does a company get good leads? Right? They have to have some mechanism by which good leads come into the sales department. So these are some of the jobs that are available for engineers. We're looking for people like you, but not you specifically. That's a joke. Okay, let's see. All right, so have you ever thought, how does a company, how did Google get started? How did Cisco get started? Right? The way those companies start is somebody has an idea, or maybe a team of people have an idea. I think we can do this product. It could be software as a service, it could be hardware, it could be a box, it could be a sensor, but something, they got an idea. So they try that idea out, they start working with it, they start talking to some prospective customers, they do a little prototype. And you know that, does anybody remember Sun Microsystems? Okay, so Sun was the foremost server company, and then they got bought by Oracle. Well, the fifth employee at Sun was a guy named Andy Bechtolsheim. So as the fifth employee at Sun Micro, he made quite a bit of money. But he made more money with a single investment. He wrote out a check for $100,000 to Google as their first investment. So Larry Page and Sergey Brin had the check. They didn't even have a bank account to cash the check. They were that new. And Andy made more money on that investment than all of his investments. He founded actually 3 companies. He helped Sun, he founded a company called Granite, which was purchased by Cisco, and he founded a company called Kaleida. So he's a serial entrepreneur, but just that one investment. Now, earlier we talked about risk. So that $100,000 could have been spent and lost and gone. So Silicon Valley is about a place where people take great risks for the chance of doing something great. But a lot of times it doesn't work out great. That's inherent. That's part of the system that allows excellence to thrive is the same system that allows failure to happen. That's okay. That's how it works here. So you get an idea. Now, the other place that could be, now, I don't know if you realize, but the founders of Google came right out of Stanford University. Same thing with the 2 founders of Cisco. Sandra Lerner and Len Bosak were doing a research project at Cisco, and they got an idea, and they said, let's make a company out of it. They got funding from Sequoia, and that was 1984, and now we have Cisco Systems. All right, so there's this collaboration between industry and academia here that is extremely profitable. In fact, the president of Stanford University he doesn't even take a salary. He doesn't get paid to be president of Stanford University because he makes so much money helping advise companies and being on their boards. John Hennessy. So this is part of what makes that collaboration very fruitful. So when those guys started the company, they came right out of Stanford. The other companies, often it's people from other companies. Like, for example, this company I mentioned, Grand Junction. The founders all worked at a company called 3Com. They all had this idea. They left 3Com and started this company, Grand Junction. That's very common. And then some of these companies are founded by dropouts, college dropouts. Like Facebook, right? Mark Zuckerberg's a college dropout, right? And Bill Gates, college dropout. Larry Ellison, he owns 20% of Oracle. He's a college dropout. So, I will say this. There's some people where going to the university holds them back, and they have to leave the university. Right? Some people think that you got to get a great degree at a great school, and that's going to make your career successful. But there's some people where that holds them back, and they have to break out of it. And their abilities supersede what they're going to learn in college. So college is only so much of your preparation. There's so much more in relating to other people, working well with teams, taking initiative, discipline, all those things. Okay. So, not yet. Can you go back? So, a company is formed, and they start taking their prototype, and they start testing it out, and they get to the point of what's called alpha. Does anybody know what alpha is? It's when the product it's not mature, it's not stable, but it's good enough that we want the people to start playing with it. We want them to test it for us. So that's alpha. And then they keep working on it, maybe several months later it goes to beta. Beta means it's a lot more stable, but it's still not quite right. So you send it out for beta. In the meantime, the company is hiring people they need to help build this product. And at some point you get to beta, now you start to bring on some people from marketing, maybe a few people in sales, because now that someone has to interface with the customer. So these companies add people as they need them in the different areas. Let's see. At the point where there's something called GA, general availability. At the point where the product is GA, that means the company is mature enough where I can pick up the phone, I call them, or I order it online, they ship it to me like a normal company. Up to this point, these companies they don't have that all in place. So at the point of GA, now they've begun to hire a whole sales team to cover the world, and it depends on their sales strategy. If they're a direct sale, if they're working through value-added resellers, if they're working through channel partners, companies that take other people's products and help the end user assemble it to make it work. You don't go to Cisco and order a CRS-1 router for $1 million and then you install it yourself. You need a cadre of qualified people to help get that thing working. So there's whole businesses made, and there's a whole ecosystem of companies that help the user use the product of a highly technical company. There's jobs all in between. And it all comes down to, this is dollar, or R&D, and skills. So if we plot these, you notice that the steeper this curve, there's a greater increase in someone's value. And the way we call it, in fact, you should write this down. Dollars chase skills. Dollars chase skills. Does that make sense? See, if I were the best nuclear engineer in America today, I wouldn't have very many places that want to hire me, because nuclear power is kind of on the out in the United States. So it doesn't matter how good my skills are, nobody really cares about my skills. So you have to have marketable skills that people want. And if you have those, then you'll have people coming after you offering more money, either for your services as an employee, or the venture capitalists also chase the skilled people to build companies. So the steeper this curve is, that means the more you're learning and the more valuable you're becoming. The problem with the steep curve is it's hard. All right, if I have been in the same job for 20 years, I show up to work, there's never really a big challenge, I've been doing this for years, it's not very difficult for me, then I'm not learning very much. And I'm not going to be very valuable. So it's the steep part of the curve that's desirable, especially early in your career. Right? You'll see people go to a startup company, and in 5 years, they've experienced more than most people do in a whole career. So you want to be in a company where you have a chance to increase your skills. Making money is just a byproduct. The main thing is to increase your skills. And that is all kinds of skills. That could be technical skills, that could be your ability to close deals, your ability to do a presentation, your ability to articulate the value proposition, your ability to come up with a plan that actually works for a company. So there's all kinds of skills, and they're not just technical. Okay, the other thing is that funding. So companies typically will do, let's see. Companies typically do what's called a Series A. Series A. Boy, that's not working so well. So Series A, Series B, Series, wow. See, well, never mind. Anyways, companies that they get their funding, they sell part of the company to an investor. The investor gives them money, and that would be called the Series A investment round. So most companies will need about 5 different rounds before they have a successful outcome. A successful outcome defined as either being acquired by another company or going public. Oh, much better. So Series A, B, C, D, E. So most companies will do about a Series E. Some companies, very rarely, will just have a Series A and B. So an example of that is, you remember YouTube? Right, you have YouTube? So YouTube only did 2 rounds of funding when Google bought them for about $1.6 billion. Now that other company I mentioned before that was founded by the Shinhua grads, that's NetScreen. They went all the way to Series E, F, G, and H. They did 8 rounds of funding before they went public. So there's another thing called a seed round. Oh, look, that works really well. So a seed round is where maybe a company takes just $1 million or $2 million. It's just a small amount to get them started. The advantage of a seed round is that if my company is very successful, I've kept more of the company for myself. I've only sold a little sliver of it. But the disadvantage is, if at the end of my funding I didn't have a good idea, then I'm done. The company's over with. So that's, now the advantage of going with a Series A first time is the company is got a lot more money, which means they have a lot longer to work on their idea and make it successful. If the company is unsuccessful, they have a longer time to try to prove it. But if the company is successful, the disadvantage is they've sold more of the company to the investors. So there's always a trade-off. Okay, next. A couple of comments about finding a job. First of all, when you're looking for a job, whether you're unemployed or whether you already have a job, finding a job is like full-time work. But in some ways, it's more difficult than full-time work. And the reason is that it's mentally and usually emotionally exhausting. So let's suppose one of you has a dream to work at Google. You really want to work at Google. Oh, your whole life you've wanted to work at Google. So now it comes time for the interview. Are you just going to waltz in there unprepared, or are you going to be really at the top of your game? So emotionally, you're very excited. You want to do well in this interview. And now after the interview, you want to hear back from everybody. Am I going to get to the next stage? Do they want me? Are they interested? Oh my gosh, they didn't call me back for an interview. Oh, I blew it, right? So interviewing and looking for jobs can be emotionally very tiring, very up and very down. So when you're looking at the job, understand that's how it's going to be, and that's okay. The other thing is that at the end of the day, when you get a job, it's a person that hires you. So you report to a hiring manager. So companies don't hire people, people hire people. So when you're looking for a job, you want to do people things. You want to meet people. You want to call people on the phone. You want to go shake their hand and talk to them. What some people do is they get in the mode of, oh, I'll send a resume. So they're sending it out and they're doing everything on the computer. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's not very effective. Nobody is going to hire you because they saw your resume. They're going to hire you because they met you and they shook your hand and you talked to them and they said, I like this person, I think they can do the job. So getting a good career move is a very people-centric business. It's meeting people, it's talking to them, it's understanding them. So you want to do people things instead of nerdy, geeky things, just sending out emails. That make sense? Okay. What's next? Oh yeah. I should make this comment. There was a company we worked with once. We were actually investors in this company. They were funded by Sequoia Capital. And the company was shut down. Nobody was working there. The building is completely empty. But their website was still there with, here's the information about us, here's our team, here's our investors, here's our products, here's how you get a hold of us. And the company didn't even exist anymore. So it's an illustration that you're not going to necessarily find good jobs by looking at websites. Because the website may or may not reflect what's really going on. Does that make sense? So someone could see that and say, send us your resume. And they send their resume. Boy, I'm hoping to hear from them. But I knew there's nobody even working there. It's an empty building. In fact, all the computers had been repossessed by the financing people. So you can't rely on what a website says. At the end of the day, you have to rely on what the people who work for the company or the people who work with the company, what they know. All right. Good and bad reasons to change jobs. A good reason to change jobs is not to make more money. That's not a good reason. A good reason is to increase your skills, because if you can increase your skills, that's what's going to make you in demand. That's going to make you marketable. So if you have an opportunity to work with a fantastic team, that's better than making more money but working with just some average people. One of the companies we work with, the CEO, when the company was bought by Cisco, he went to work in the office of the president for Cisco. So the top guy at Cisco is John Chambers. And then in the office of the president is a guy named Howard Charney. Well, when Howard Charney was doing this little startup company, I had a candidate that he met with. And the candidate was like, it's a good company, but I've got a good company now. So I don't really know what to do. And after he met with Howard Charney, he said, that's it, I want to go work with him. Because this guy was really an outstanding person. He had been a VP of everything. VP of engineering, VP of marketing, VP of legal, VP of sales, VP of international. He was a true Renaissance man. This guy was capable to do almost anything. So just on the fact that he'd be able to work with someone so great, he took the job. And he did so well that now he's retired. So my point is that if you can work with great people or you can acquire skills, that's a good reason to go to that company. But the bad reasons are, well, I'm going to save 5 minutes a day on my commute. So I'm going to switch to this new company because I won't have to get on 101. I won't have to get on 280. That's not a good reason to change a job. Or I'm going to get $1,000 a year more. That's not a good reason. You've got to have good reasons. And that's all about quality people and obtaining skills, marketable skills. Okay, next slide, please. Now, this is a quote from Fortune magazine. Okay, it says, often it's good to make a move when you're on top. It's an old story. Success begets success. When your current employment picture is rosy, you naturally exude confidence. Your judgment tends to be sounder because you're considering new opportunities from the healthiest standpoint. The best time to switch is at the peak of your cycle. Now, most engineers, they read this and they go, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. And so everybody agrees with this, but almost nobody does it. See, most people, they have a job. As long as they like the job, they're not going to look for something else. But as soon as they don't like their job, they got to fight with their boss, or there's someone in their department they don't like, or they didn't get as big of a raise as they like, or the company's downsizing and they're afraid they're going to get laid off. Those are all the reasons that people use to make a job change. Those are not good reasons. And the best time to do it is, you're on top of your game, you just got promoted, you just got a raise, the CEO just came to your office and said you're doing a great job, and you're at the top of the world. That's the best time to be open. Not necessarily to make the move, but to be open to it, because you're being hired at the peak. So I'll go back to the previous slide. So when you're doing really well, learning a lot, you're on the steep part of the curve. Now, if while I'm here, someone says, wow, this guy's on a sharp curve, and they're going to give me a chance to do that same thing over again in a new company, I'm going to be growing in my career really fast. But most people wait till my job's boring, I don't want to be here anymore, I'm not making enough money, and then they make a job move. They should have done it back here. So let's go to the next slide. So it's counterintuitive. You want to switch jobs at your peak. So again, makes sense, people agree, but most people don't do it. So I leave it with you. Okay, next slide. Yes. Clive's sense that the interview was slipping away from him. Everybody he was interviewing with fell asleep and was listening to their iPod. Next slide. Okay, now, I'm going to give you a personal story about my experience at the airport in Urumqi. Urumqi, out in the west. So I was there a couple of years ago, and there was a large circular area where the customer service people were there. You have a problem, you got bumped from your flight, you got to make a new flight arrangement, so you wait, you talk to them. but it's a big circular area. So I could see these people in front of me, and then beyond them were people that had their back to me, and they have their computer monitor here. And I could see these people, they're supposedly working, right? One was looking at a Facebook-like site. What is it, Tencent? What's the Facebook of China?
人
Tencent?
人
And the other one was on some kind of shopping site, right? And the customers are walking up to this person, and they didn't even like shut it down and say, yes, can I help you? What can I do for you? They didn't even do that. They're sitting here, they just went like this. I couldn't believe it. I said, how can you have a job like that? So they won't have a job long. So 1/3 of workers plan to holiday shop, according to a Career Builder survey. So when you're at work, your employer is paying you to do work. They're not paying you to shop or chat with your friends or watch YouTube videos, right? Or listen to music. So people are not very smart about how they use the internet at work, and that creates problems for their career. 58% of workers admitted they use the internet for non-work related activities while at the office. 21 will typically spend 1 hour or more of personal internet use while at work. 21%, that's a lot. 2/3 of workers reported they typically send non-work related emails each day. So, I'm not saying this is evil. I'm saying that you have to be careful to manage it, or else your productivity will be sapped, and eventually someone's going to notice. That's not good for your career. Half of employers block employees from accessing certain websites. 32% of employees monitor emails, and 16% monitors in IM, SMS. 8% have fired an employee for non-work related emails. How about that? Send the wrong email, fired. And social media. 61% of full-time workers reported they have a social networking profile. Okay, next slide. Now, Vinod Khosla is, he used to be a partner at Kleiner Perkins, and he was the founding CEO of Sun Microsystems. Today, Vinod has his own venture firm. He's an investor in one of the companies I'm working with. Here's what he says. Some people try to assume they understand the market, and I always say that I don't. Fundamentally, I bet on people. So, I was mentioning earlier, when it comes to your career, people hire people. So you send a resume out on the internet, that has this much value. But when you meet someone, you talk to them on the phone or you meet with them face to face, that has a lot of value. So Vinod is saying, and Vinod's a really smart guy, but he's saying, it's not that I understand the market or I understand the technology, he's fundamentally betting on people. So you've got someone that started 3 or 4 successful companies in a row, probably a good chance that the next company they do is going to be successful. You have someone that hasn't had a job for 2 years, and they spend most of their time on internet sites, and they say they want to do something great, probably not a good bet. And then here, now you probably don't know this name, Arthur Rock. Art Rock is the guy that invented venture capital partnership. Traditionally, companies get their money, they get their money from banks. Like you'll see that GE will line up a $20 million loan from Chase Bank or from JP Morgan. But this idea of venture capital partnership is fairly new. And Art Rock was the guy who invented this. And a VC is not just money. The VCs have contacts with customers, with other people in technology. They can help those companies to develop markets, develop technology, and develop resources. So Art Rock was an early investor in Intel and Apple. And for a long time, he was the only venture capitalist on the Forbes 400. And he says you have to pay attention, a lot more attention to who's running the company than whether the products are right or not. So it's the same thing. Okay, this is something you don't want to do. Because job hoppers, see, the best indicator of the future is the past. If someone has changed jobs every year for the last 5 years, every year they change jobs, and they come to me and they say, I want to work somewhere for a long time. I want to settle down here. I want to work here for the next 5 years. I have to look at, that's what they're saying. But their track record is that they change jobs every year. So the higher probability is next year they're going to leave my company. So you don't want to be changing jobs every year. You want to make sure that you work long enough to really make a contribution to the company and you grow your skills. So we always say 3, 4, 5 years. per company. It could be longer, it could be shorter, but that's kind of rule of thumb. Now here's an example of a guy who focused on increasing his skills. Pat Gelsinger today is the CEO of VMware. I talked to Pat many, many years ago. So Pat got a degree from Santa Clara University, and he got a master's from Stanford. Now, during the Intel 386, one of the early microprocessors, he was like a technician working in the lab. So he's the guy I mentioned to you before that is stuffing the solder board and ordering parts. That's a pretty lowly job. It's important, but it's lowly. But this guy, incredible desire to learn and grow. And then by the time the Intel did the 486, he was one of the guys on the design team. By the time they did the 586, which they renamed the Pentium, he was the design team leader. After that, he became the senior VP general manager of that group. He was the first CTO at Intel, and in fact, he was, 32 years old, I think. Let's see. Yeah, he was promoted to group vice president at the age of 32. So he was the youngest group vice president in the history of Intel. And he had, that group was the largest group at Intel that had 50% of the revenue. So Pat is an amazing guy. And anywhere along here, a lot of people would have said, look, I've got a successful career, I'm done. But he kept going up. So eventually, he went over to EMC. He was the president and COO of one of their divisions, and today he's CEO of VMware. And Pat's probably only about 55, pretty young guy still. So this is a good example of a real live person who focused from the beginning on increasing his skill set. Now by the time he's up here as a president and a CEO, then those technical skills are not as important. Now it's how well can he get a deal done? How well can he interface with Congress? How well can he inspire investors? So there's a lot of different skill sets along the way. So again, focus on increasing your skills. Don't just focus on money or working with your friends. There's many good reasons to change jobs, and there's many bad reasons. Next slide. So again, focus on increasing your skills. Next slide. Now, this is a guy that I placed. Let's go 2 more slides. Okay, good. So he got a degree from Caltech down in Pasadena, and he went to work, okay, previous slide. He went to work for ESL, which is a big military government defense contractor. It's not a high growth company, but they do hire bright people. So he worked there for 2 years, and he came to me and he said, I'm not going to go anywhere in this company. This company is moving real slow, but he had got some good skills. So I placed him, he's an electrical engineer there, I placed him at C-Cube Microsystems. This was the first company to do MPEG and JPEG chips. And so he joined them as just an engineer with 2 years experience, and he had gotten his master's from Stanford. And then at C-Cube, there's 4 founders. Years later, one of the founders left, and this guy, Rob, he took that guy's place as the application engineering manager. Later, he was promoted to become director of consumer marketing. Then after that, he started this company called Arithmos. He was the co-founder, and he was the VP of marketing. And he's the only VP of marketing I know that in an interview, he would derive fast Fourier transforms on the whiteboard with the applicant to see if the applicant understood. It's not very often a marketing guy is so bright they're doing fast Fourier transforms. But highly technical guy. And so he started this company, they sold it to ST Microelectronics. And then what he doesn't say on his resume, notice, this is from his LinkedIn profile. See where it says he worked here from 97, then the next company starts in 2000. What he doesn't say on his LinkedIn profile is in between, he realized that the business he was in, which is faster computer graphics, JPEG, MPEG, motion video, and that stuff, he didn't see a long-term future in it. So he decided, he had been a VP and a co-founder of a company. He took a step down to become a director in a kind of a B-rate company. So here's, this is important to understand. The A-rate companies hire A people. The best companies hire the best people. And the B-rate companies usually hire the B people. And the C-rate companies, they're not very good. They somehow limp along year after year. They're not a very good company. They don't hire very good people. So there's this association of A with A and B with B and C with C. And so Rob is an A plus guy, but he went to work for kind of a B company. The reason was he didn't know anything about storage. This is a guy that's a chip, he's a motion video chip guy. He doesn't know about storage, but he's really smart. So he goes and takes a job with a B-rate storage company. It's called Adaptec. I think they're still around. And that's where he learned the storage business. And then he was able to go to Veritas, and from there he went back up on this career. Let's go back one more. And so then he was at Veritas as a vice president of product management. Veritas got bought by Symantec, became a senior vice president of storage and available management group, and then he went to Cisco where he's SVP over the enterprise networking group. I think he's got about 6,000 people in his organization, and he's probably 40 years old. So he's got a number of good career moves he made. Number one, he did not stay at a comfortable job that had high job security, because that's a big limitation on your career. So he went and took the risk and joined a startup. That company that he joined as a startup, that company could have failed. A lot of these companies fail. So he took the risk, and he focused on improving his skills, and then he made the smart move of getting out of an industry that was peaking out and taking a step back in level, right? He went from a VP to a director, and he took a step back from working at a very cool company to kind of an also-ran, kind of like one of these companies. But that's where he learned a new business, and then he got his career back on track. So a lot of good examples from Rob Sonnenberg. That might be our last slide. Is there any more? There we go, okay. Now, I know that none of you speak English as your first language, so I know this might be harder for you, but it's still important. Fortunately, we have spell check. If I create a document, I hit F7 or F5 or whatever it is, and it shows me all my errors, right? So use spell check. But typing mistakes in a job application could kill a would-be employee's chance of landing a job, as employers bet that a sloppy resume means the applicant will do a sloppy job. So if you have a resume, make sure that you pay attention to have your best. Don't have grammatical or spelling errors. A telephone survey of 100 senior Canadian executives showed that more than a fifth of executives said a single typo on a resume or a cover letter could cost a potential employee a job. A single typo. The survey published was carried out online job search for account temps. The resume is an applicant's first chance to impress the hiring manager. Now look at this one. I hope you can read this. Common mistakes include "Dear Sir" or "Madman." It's supposed to be "Madame," but they didn't check it. It says "Madman," like someone who's crazy, right? "I'm attacking my resume." They mean attaching, okay? And then, and then at the bottom it says, "Following is a brief overview of my skills." They mean brief overview. Grief is when your best friend dies, you're grief, right? And "I have a keen eye for derail." That's supposed to be detail.
Oh.
So these are common mistakes. So even if you use spell checker, you have to check it yourself, make sure it's good. So I know this because I probably look at 200 resumes a week for the last 25 years. So I've seen tens of thousands of resumes, and you see all kinds of mistakes. So that's something that's very easily preventable. Take the time to make sure your resume doesn't have mistakes like these. Okay. Questions and answers. Comments. Anybody?
大家有什么问题吗？可以提吗？
每个人至少一个问题。
No questions? One thing I can say, an environment, this is a quote from Eric Benamou. Eric Benamou was the CEO at 3Com, which is a big networking company. In their time, they were like Cisco. He said, "An environment that is rich in change is rich in opportunity." An environment that is rich in change is rich in opportunity. This is true. If you're selling steel, there's only so much you can do with steel. You can build buildings, increasingly, steel is being displaced and cars are putting in aluminum, right? Ford's got the best-selling truck for 20 years in a row, and they just took 700 pounds out of it by building the body out of aluminum, right? So steel is not a growth industry. So you go into the steel industry, you pretty much know exactly what you deal with costs, you deal with regulation, you deal with pollution, but there's not much growth in the steel industry. But you go into the world of online advertising, AdWords, search optimization, right? Coming up with new algorithms by which to identify prospective customers. Data mining, right? Big data. Those are huge growth areas. And so those are markets and areas that are changing rapidly. So those are areas in which there's a great amount of change, therefore a great amount of opportunity. That's where you'll find the VCs. You don't see VCs funding new automobile companies. You don't see them funding a new coal company because there's no change in those markets. They have to fund companies that are doing something that offers an outsized upside. Okay. Any questions? Otherwise, I have baklava for you. No questions. Here in America, we encourage students to ask questions. In fact, we encourage students to sit in the front and get the teacher's attention and ask a lot of questions, right? It's not an environment where you sit back and listen and memorize. It's an environment where you try to understand what is he actually saying so that I can ask questions and really get to the understanding. So asking questions is actually a really good thing here. And so today, feel free to ask questions. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm happy to share with you. There's so many stories I could tell you, but there's only so much time. Anybody can ask a question. Yes. A question, yes.
Is it a good idea for me to just start my own business right after university, or I should just go for just a company for my skills?
So his question is it a good idea to start his own business right after university, or should he work at a company for a while first? It's a very good question, and the answer is usually you want to work and get your feet wet, so to speak. You want to understand how companies work. When you come out of college, there's so much that you don't know. And you know enough to contribute to a job, but there's so much you don't know. So it's better usually to get a few years. Now, the exception are these unusually bright visionaries like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Larry Ellison. These people that are really going to work somewhere would just hold them back. But they're exceptional people. And in fact, usually, unless you're one of them, you want to partner with someone like that. Like this guy, Steve Ballmer, right? Steve Ballmer just stepped down a few months ago as the CEO of Microsoft. How did he get into Microsoft? He was Bill Gates' buddy in college. Now, Steve Ballmer's a smart guy. Unlike Bill Gates, he got a master's degree, and he was like one of the first employees. So, sometimes knowing the super smart guy and doing what you can to help that guy, that is a good career move. But most of us in this room are not Mark Zuckerberg. So most of us probably would do well to get a few years working somewhere, meet people, understand how finance works, understand how sales works, understand how manufacturing works, understand how the legal department works, understand those things before you launch off and do your own company. That's a good question.
I still have one.
Yeah.
Once Google employee told us that if there's a company that does really good in this field, that you might not want to start your own business in this field. So, what do you think?
He said that if there's a company that does really, really good in its field, you might not want to start a company in that same field.
Yeah.
So, interesting for a Google person to say that. Sometimes, like we mentioned Sequoia Capital, their rule is they will not fund two different companies that compete against each other because they're trying to make this company successful. So why would they fund another company that's trying to bring them down? So that's a lose-lose situation. At the same time, sometimes a company starts doing this, and this company over here is doing something different. But over time, markets and technology change, and over time they end up becoming direct competitors. That happens. But they didn't start off with the intent of doing that. So, what that person said, boy,
He's an engineer.
I respectfully disagree, and here's why. Everybody for the last 20 years has been trying to find a way to eat Cisco's lunch. Right? Cisco is a 70% gross margin business. They make a lot of money at Cisco, selling routers and switches. The truth is that's a very difficult market to break into because you got to come up with something that's way better. If I come up with something that's just as good as Cisco, why should I buy what you have? I'll just buy it from Cisco. But if you come up with something that's 10 times better, or it's 1/10 the cost, now I might do it. But people for years have been going to the venture capitalists and have some brilliant idea to go after a market that Cisco's in. And a lot of companies have been successful with that, including those guys from Tsinghua. Right? Feng Dang, Yan Qi, and Ken Zi. Those guys did really well going right after Cisco's market in security. So I would respectfully disagree. In fact, if a company is really, really successful, then unless the barrier to entry is really high, then that's probably exactly what you want to go after. Right? If a company's successful and they're making a lot of money, then other people say, hey, we want to be successful and make a lot of money too. Now, the difficulty is, like right now, Ford Motor Company, they're printing money left and right. They're making a lot of money. But if you want to start a car company, how much money do you need? You need billions of dollars to start a car company, right? So you want to go for a business that the barrier to entry is not too high. So, you know, a lot of these web startups, in $10, $15 million, they don't need a lot of investment to get started. So I would respectfully disagree with the Google engineer. But I could see where he might say that, thinking, look, we own search and advertising on mobile and LAN devices. We'd rather not smart people compete with us. Of course they don't want that. Other questions? We need a question from one of the ladies. Maybe it's too early.
You can ask them questions.
Ask a question?
经历
Ask them questions.
我没想到有什么要问的。
Ooh, questions coming. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Maybe I wanna ask you, do you like your job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you share with us a story or a person that you have deep memory. I mean, if someone he has get a job and this job this job brought him a lot of things.
A lot of sense?
Things.
A lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one job changed his life.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we got a lot of those. So one guy in particular, it's hard to put a context, but he was at the time, arguably the best computer graphics company there was. And he had a growing responsibility. He had a bachelor's degree, didn't have a master's, which is pretty unusual. Almost everybody today has a master's. And so he called me up and he said, you know, it's a good job, but I don't feel I'm challenged as much as I should. And the company was big, they had maybe 2,000 people. So he told me, I want a company that has 10 people or less. How many companies have 10 people or less that happen to be hiring what you do? That's a very, very small number, and it's very difficult to find that. So I said, okay. And I got him to talk to this company that had about 35 people. And he said, no, I told you I want a company with 10 people. And I said, look, this is a great company, and you should go talk to them. Now, if you talk to them, and you meet with them face to face, and you see how bright these guys are, you see about what they're doing, and after you've met with them, you decide, I talked to them, I don't want it. They're bright people, but it's not for me. then I'm okay with that, because then you did your due diligence. In fact, you can turn that off.
Close. 还有个 close。
A decision is only as good as the facts available to make the decision. You see people making the huge career mistake of making a decision not based upon facts, but based upon hearsay. For example, there's a company called ABC Company, and it's a great company, you should go talk to them. And you go, I had a friend, and one time he was at lunch, and the guy at the table next door worked at ABC, and he was talking about what a terrible boss he had. So, no, I don't want to go to that company. Well, that's a stupid decision, because he's turning it down without knowing anything about the company. He has a friend who overheard a conversation. We don't know what the context was. Maybe the guy was in a bad mood. Maybe he was a bad employee. There's so much we don't know. So, get the facts to make a good decision. So, this guy, he wanted a 10-person company, and I showed him a company that had 35. But he went and he talked to him. And so he called me on a Saturday morning, I was at home, and he said, first of all, I want to thank you for convincing me to talk to them. Those are really great guys. They're really bright. What they're doing is so exciting. Thank you so much for twisting my arm, right? So, then he says, but I still really want a 10-person company. And so I politely, respectfully declined to talk to them anymore. In the meantime, the company had called me and said, this guy's really bright, we want to hire him. So I spent about an hour twisting his arm again, saying, look, why don't you talk to him one more time, let them make a job offer for you. Now you have a decision. Because when you think about it, in the interview stage, you have nothing until you have the job offer. Once you have an offer, now you can make a decision. But until there's an offer, there's no decision to be made. They still haven't said, please join us. You're waiting for them to say, please join us. Here's the numbers. So I twisted his arm, he went and talked to him again. And by this time, he was completely sold. He said, thanks for talking me into it, I want to work with these guys. These guys are brilliant. So he went there, and he worked for the chief architect. And then some years later, the chief architect left, and he became the chief architect. The company went public. They did really, really well. And he made enough money where he doesn't need to work ever again. And so now what he does what he wants to do. And he's not interested in video compression. He wants to do medical electronics. So for the last 15 years, he's been doing his own medical electronics company. Because he wants to design cool things that help people who have health issues or health maintenance issues. That's what he really wanted to do. So that one move changed his life. But it didn't come easily. He had to be open-minded to think, I shouldn't be too set on what I want. I should also listen to people that know more than I do. And once he did that, then he was able to be convinced that that was the right place for him. So that changed his life. A guy named David Galby. If you ever see him, tell him I say hi. He's around here somewhere. Almost all the people I work with are in this area. So that's one story. There's many like, I should tell you one bonehead mistake. You know the term bonehead? A bonehead is someone who's not smart. So this guy made a bonehead mistake. So here's a CEO. Remember we had this before? And then here's one of his people is the VP of engineering, right? And the VP of engineering has got software and maybe hardware and maybe test. So there's usually a director of test or QA, and then maybe he's got a manager of test, and under that is like a software QA engineer. So 1, 2, 3, 4 levels from the CEO. So there's this software QA engineer I placed one time, and he's really, really good. And this is what he does. He's a software QA engineer. So he decided it's a good company, but I'm not sure I want to join them long term. So can I do a contract and just work maybe a couple of months? And the CEO said, sure, we can do that. So that way he can work, he can test out the company can test him out. After 3 months, I talked to the CEO. I said, what do you want to do with this guy? He said, I want to hire him. He's really, really good engineer. Good. So I call him up and I say, what do you want to do? He said, this is a great company. They're smart people, they're friendly, they're good to work with, they got a great market opportunity. It's a great company. Therefore, he should work there. That's what I'm thinking. He says, but I decided I don't want to work here. I said, why not? He goes, I want to work at a company where I can turn things around. I can go to a company that's kind of doing poorly and I can turn it around. I'm thinking, maybe a CEO can turn a company around. Maybe even a VP of engineering can go in and turn around an organization. He can't turn around anything, right? That's not the appropriate function of a software QA engineer to turn a company around. So he turned down the job offer. So fast forward 2 years, and that company went public, and they had offered him, I think they offered him 20,000 shares of stock. And then the company, when they went public, they didn't have enough shares outstanding. So they split the shares. So his 20,000, they split it 2-for-1 forward split. So he would have had 40,000. And then the company went public, I think at 20, they priced at 24 and they closed the first day at $34 a share. So if you take 34 times 40,000, what is that? I think that's $1.2 million. And then the company continued to go up after that. So he called me on the phone the day that the company went public. He said, did you see what happened today? I said, yeah. Because I placed 30 people in that company. Several people became millionaires that day. He said, I can't believe it. I'm kicking myself. I can't believe what a mistake I made. I could have made all this money. And I said, oh no. No, you had 20,000 shares, right? He goes, yeah. I go, but did you know that they forward split the stock 2-for-1? Are you kidding me? I go, no, I'm not kidding you. They didn't have enough outstanding shares. So he knew that he made a big mistake. After he talked to me, he realized he made twice as big a mistake. And he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for that mistake. See, he should have listened to good advice, but he didn't, and he lost millions of dollars. So later on, he got an offer with a company called NetGravity. So NetGravity was an ad search company that was bought by DoubleClick. And DoubleClick was bought by Google for about $4 billion. So he was so eager to make up for this mistake that when they interviewed him, they said, this guy's really bright, want to hire him. And he said, I want to work for only stock, no cash. And they're like, that's weird. You know, you're not a multimillionaire, you're not an investor, you're an engineer. So, okay, well, we'll give you some smaller salary, try to get you more stock. He goes, no, I want all stock. And they said, this guy's weird. And you think, gosh. So some people are really, really bright. They're good engineers, but they're not bright about their career decisions. So that's where we come in. So something I should mention is if you get a call, let's suppose we fast forward, you got a job in Silicon Valley, or you got a job in China. I'm assuming there's recruiters in China, maybe not. But if a recruiter calls you, then you have to be able to vet the recruiter. You have to determine, is this a recruiter someone I should work with or someone I should stay away from? And the key is, what is the recruiter's relationship with the company? Any recruiter can go on a website and see that Oracle's got 500 job openings. So I call you up, hi, I'm a recruiter, I got a position over here at Oracle. Well, do I really have a position there? I read it on the website like you can. There's no value add there. But if I'm meeting with Larry Ellison every week, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this candidate, Larry, what do you think? There's value in that relationship. So the key of recruiters is that they have a relationship with the company that they're talking to you about. And they're not just sitting there reading about something and throwing your resume at them. So The quality of the recruiter is based upon the quality of the relationships they have. Because remember we talked about this being a people business, all about people? So anybody can know about a company. Sure, you can drive by the company and say, I was there. That doesn't mean anything. What counts is that you've met with the person that makes the decision, that they want to work with you, that they are working with you. So you can ask them, what is your relationship with the company? You have to hear that you're satisfied, that maybe they've placed 5 people there. Or maybe that they placed the manager, so they know the manager personally. So that's important, because this business, you asked if I like my job, I think someone asked that. This is a business that's almost no barrier to entry. Anybody can get in this business. All you need is a telephone, right? And send a couple of emails. You don't need a lot of technology. But the value in the business is the people you know. So a lot of people will jump in this business, and then when the market goes south, they take off and go do something else. So you want to work with someone who's been in the business a while, and someone who's got a relationship with the company they're talking about. That's the key. That's a good question, thank you. What time are you leaving, Sherry?
I think in 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yeah. Or in 15 minutes also okay.
So I have baklava for everybody.
Yeah.
You want to bring it in?
Yeah.
Does anybody know what baklava is? Okay, so if you ever go to Greece, the dessert, one of the desserts in Greece is called baklava. And so it's a layered pastry, and it's kind of sweet, and it's so good. So this is care of my wife. My wife didn't make it, but
Yeah.
one of our friends,
Each one,
she made it.
everyone, and one.
Yeah, one each. They're really good.
这么这么好。
So if you forget everything I say, just remember the baklava.
哦，太好了，牛逼，小菜盘子呀，
I want to. I thought I was going to this year.
拍个。
I wouldn't have been able to.
棍子，good, smart, people like them.
You know what I could do?
推荐一下，
I've got 20,000 residents in my system. I can do a search.
他推荐了我朋友听这个视频，这怎么办？
Like this guy, I talk about Rob Soderbergh. He went to Caltech. So when I said Caltech, I took a picture of the school. I said, so you can get I'm gonna take a picture of this class here. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay, no problem.
I'll take a picture of you eating your baklava. What you do is you have the baklava.
His wife is a
like
Chinese.
this.
But I cannot speak Mandarin, cannot speak Chinese, only Cantonese, right?
What's that?
Michelle.
Canton.
One more question from the,
Yes.
and she wanted you to recommend some books for them to read for their careers or
Books about career?
Yep.
You know, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yep.
That would be one.
高效能人士的7个习惯这本书你应该听说过。
啊
You know, I'll tell you what I read.
高效能人士的7个习惯。Okay, I should translate.
okay.
I read the Zig Ziglar. They might not know that name. Zig Ziglar was a motivational speaker, but he said that every day he reads the Bible and the newspaper,
Yeah.
and that way he knows what God and the other side is up to.
Okay.
The Bible and the newspaper. So the newspaper I read the Bible every day, but the newspaper I read is the Wall Street Journal. That is an outstanding newspaper, and I would recommend that over the New York Times, because the New York Times is I think it's politically biased, but the Wall Street Journal, that's actually the top selling newspaper in America. And I can't tell you how much money I have saved or made by reading that newspaper. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
How the time?
Time is,
no.
time is like eye candy. That's, time is for people who don't even go to college. It's not.
Yeah, we ask our students, everyone must read time every week.
Time is good to know what's going on right now.
Oh, okay.
But it's not I mean, the Journal and the Times are in-depth reporting, good journalism. Sorry. Oh, I need this picture.
修订应该改一下。And you mentioned the Friday night.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
Friday night.
Okay, so you have your baklava, go like this if you like it.
Okay.
Oh. Alright, ready? And I'll get this group over here. Here we go.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh yeah, and so Friday night, this week, my wife and I have a Bible study that we do at our home. We live in Santa Clara, very close to Santa Clara University. And that starts at 7 o'clock. And so we also have, there'll also be some food there. So if some of you want to come, or if all of you want to come, just let Sherry know so I know we can plan for you to be there.